And while we were together, we'd say, hey, maybe this actually should be a little bit, we should lean into the comedy of it, the like ridiculousness of playing Girl, I'm Gonna Miss You at a funeral and stuff like that. So I feel like that's where you and I clicked and figured out we don't have to be too serious. There are inherently funny moments that kind of come up in the real story of, I mean, they actually played that song at the funeral in real life. So it's not like we even made that up.
Mom, for my final words to you, I will leave this to two poets who are much better at this than I. In their words, girl, I'm gonna miss you.
I knew it from the start, you would break my heart, but still I had to play this painful part. You wrapped me around your little bitty finger with your magic smile. You kept me hanging on a lover's cross a while. You put your spell on me, took my breath away, but there was nothing I could do to make you stay. I'm gonna miss you.
Hi, my name is Carl Franklin, and I was one of the directors on Monsters, the Eric and Lyle Menendez story. And Peggy Tachdjian and I, Peggy, who was one of the editors on the show, we're going to discuss the first episode, and actually the opening scene of the first episode. So without any further ado, Peggy, do you want to get into it first, or should I?
I don't know. Hi, Carl.
How are you?
We spent a lot of time on this cold open, or this whole chunk before the main title.
Are you sure he's going to be able to do this?
Don't worry, he's a great actor. He did a Shakespeare monologue once.
I have an idea about how it's cut in my head, but I don't really discuss that with the editor ahead of time. I like for them to go ahead and do their pass so that, some ideas that I might not have thought of will suddenly show up. And, that just expands the kind of collaboration and expands what I feel is the possibilities of doing something good. So at any rate, that's what we did in this case. Peggy did an assembly, and it was a really strong one. And then I came in and, tweaked it some here and there. And, we worked with timing and emphasis on certain areas in the scene. But, a lot of that had been laid out. And, that all, of course, goes from the writing to the planning of the script with, Jason McCormick and I, who's the cinematographer. With certain things that we're trying to accomplish. And then Peggy comes in and she looks at it and without having heard what it is we're trying to do, she brings her interpretation, and it was quite a good interpretation.
While we were working on the funeral scene specifically, I think is when we found the tone of the show, because I do remember my first edit of it being a lot sadder, a lot more serious, but there was just these, kind of slightly funny, naturally funny moments that would come up.
Those poor boys.
Lyle is obsessed we get this song right.
The appeal of this subject matter was the extremes that it embraced. First off, you had, the perfect kind of Hollywood crime story, where you had rich kids whose father was in the film business and who was quasi famous, and boys who killed their parents. So extremes on all levels. And as Peggy said, the song actually was played at the funeral and the memorial. Evidently, this was the memorial, but it was played at the funeral too. I have since found out, at least it has been, put out there that, the boys didn't select it. It was supposed to be the PR firm that did, but I know the boys were very, very into Milli Vanilli. So it's kind of hard to divorce them from some connection to the song. But it definitely, the extremes of what we were working with, the characters were such extreme characters who played at the edges, and it wasn't going to stop here. I mean, as you go through, you're going to meet Ozeal, you're going to meet Judalon, you're going to meet all of these people who conformed to the stereotype and who confirmed the stereotype, and in some instances who actually even busted the stereotype a little bit, who went a little further. So it definitely had paradoxical kind of an appeal.
Definitely. And I think our two lead actors really helped with that, because there's these moments of, where you feel genuine sympathy for these two boys. And then we get, later in the episode and you're like, no, wait, right. They actually did kill their parents. It's not a question of did they, didn't they? They actually did kill their parents. And so how am I feeling so much for them? And I think we walked a fine line between feeling sympathy for them and sort of viewing them as these villains that in the Hollywood story of it all that murdered their parents in cold blood. So it was kind of interesting to jump that, to kind of keep going back and forth on that tone and finding it almost within each scene of like, is this the scene where you feel bad for them, or is this the scene where you kind of realize that there's something brewing underneath?
The show kind of said what it wanted to do in a lot of ways. I mean, we actually kind of coaxed it some by the subjectiveness of the camera. A lot of the time we're with the characters or we're experiencing things in the way that they would experience it. We employed some of that even in how they came into the actual space where the memorial was, how we came in as one would and saw what, a participant in that memorial would see. And so in some ways we were identifying at times with the boys, and at other times we were identifying with the people who were being affected by whatever it was the boys were doing. And we kind of set up a dialectic in some ways, because I don't know. I have to say that I don't know what I ultimately feel in terms of, what should happen with them. The only thing that I can say is that I do feel that, in the second trial, they probably should have heard the evidence that was suppressed about the alleged abuse, and not just because, because somebody might say that's not relevant, but what the boys were saying was that, they were afraid that because a lot of people could say, hey, why don't you just move out? But a lot of the boys were saying that they felt that if they said anything that their lives were in danger. And you could say, well, that's pretty extreme, but molestation of your own family is kind of extreme too. So,
Yeah.
I just feel like that should have been entered in and at least seen if it had any legs at all.
Yeah, definitely. I also, it's hard to know what really happened. I think the short of it is that we'll never really know what happened in that building up to that moment. And I think that's kind of what's interesting about this series. I love that it jumped perspectives on different episodes. I love that we kind of are these, flies on the wall listening in on therapy sessions, not just with Eric, but later with the mom also, and trying to understand how these relationships all were really in relation to each other. Yeah, I love that the series doesn't. We spent some episodes just diving into the molestation. I mean, I think in episode 1 we don't even bring it up. We're just focused on the couple of months after the murder and how the boys are doing. But like, I do think it was an interesting way to read the scripts and see that each episode was going to be kind of a different perspective. I thought that was really cool.
I kind of felt that when I first read the scripts, that the script had a bounce to it, that there was something about it that at the same time it was dealing with a lot of really, objectionable material, this is pretty heavy to kill the parents. But somehow, because of the characters, because of the kind of, the zaniness of everybody, that it wasn't so much really that we even had to play into the comedy in so much as really to allow the comedy
Yes. Yeah.
to surface, because it just simply, the juxtapositions of the seriousness versus the way that they were dealing with the seriousness, you just, it would have been remiss, we would have been remiss had we, not allowed for the the comedic moments to play, I feel. And so, we leaned into that when we shot that scene. We actually took time to get the reactions of the crowd and
Yeah.
how they were responding to the song. And
I remember being in the edit bay with you, and there's one moment where Lyle makes a joke, and literally crickets. Nobody laughs. And, I had a pretty decent sized pause in there, and then you were like, let's make it a little longer. And we kind of stretched it out. We're like, is that too long? Let's try a little longer. And we kind of kept stretching it out until we were like, okay, that's too much. Pull back a little. And then I think that's still one of the funniest moments. And I remember being at the mix stage and everybody would laugh at that moment because he thinks he's being so charming and so funny, and it's just no one's reacting. But I think what's great about it is being that it's in the cold open of the first episode of a full series, it lets the audience know it's okay to laugh. There's going to be some really heavy moments in this series, but there's also going to be just some silliness, and it's okay to laugh. And it kind of gives the audience permission to go along like for this ride and not feel like that we want to be salacious.
Now I'm sitting here, wasting my time. I just don't know what I should do. It's a tragedy for me to see.
yeah, and the business of the opening scene, I thought we took care of pretty well too, because one of the things that we wanted to do was to show the difference in the personalities of the two boys.
Yes.
And how one was, much more aggressive. The other, who's really, it was his idea originally, had become really reticent about it and had a lot of emotional, baggage that he was carrying now from what they had done, and the way that we kind of separated them, and a lot of time, we'll find throughout the series that we've got Lyle coming right at camera aggressively at different times, because he seemed to have that kind of energy. And I thought that, the way that, that Peggy, your timing with that was really, really good.
Thank you.
And so, the business of the opening scene was also, as Peggy said, it was to let people know this is the tone of the show. Yes, it's so permissible to laugh, but also to introduce these guys and to give the audience a sense of who they were and in which direction they would be pointing us, and so I think we did that pretty well.
I think so too. And I think your direction of the actors to really, they feel like they really, I think that was one of the first days of shooting. It was one of my earlier dailies. And so for them to feel so already like they understand their characters, I think that they both studied up a lot and read a lot on the Menendez boys, but to feel like they both knew so much who they were, what characters they were playing, and you can really see it in every frame. And I love the last shot before we throw to the main title, which is just this like rack focus from Lyle to Eric, and Lyle is singing along, enjoying the music, and Eric looks like he is so panic stricken, and it's just such a great moment. You guys really captured some really, really amazing stuff on set that it was so fun to cut because I just had so much to play with.
We had an actual rehearsal period, which is kind of a luxury, especially in in television.
True.
We actually had 2 weeks where could work with the guys, and then we worked some with Ozil as well. But where we had sessions that we went into discovery of what these guys were feeling in the scenes, and where they had come from and why they might attack certain lines in a certain way, or we had an opportunity to really kind of dig into the material, and that I think was really important for us, because the guys I think it armed them. They already had done research on the brothers, and were very much entrenched in their personalities. But I also feel that when we started to work, we got an opportunity to kind of see what of those characters, let them plumb and see, what they can bring to the surface, and how much of it was going to help us. And so at any rate, that was a good thing that the production gave us the opportunity to rehearse.
That is awesome. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't get that opportunity much in television, right?
No, you don't. No.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is that the actors oftentimes will give you the weekend or something.
Right.
They'll come in and do that. It's the one profession that actually works for free. You never get an auto mechanic to come out and say, "Oh, let me just fix that car for you for nothing." But an actor wants, because they're very concerned about what the final, how they're going to appear on camera.
Yeah. How did you feel shooting all the murder sequence stuff? Was that hard for you? Because I know for post we were studying. I'm sure you were too. We were studying the actual crime scene photos to kind of make sure we were being as accurate as possible with all the wounds and all the blood. Um, but I'm sure from everyone from the costumer to the production designer had to also do the same thing. How was it when you were actually there the day of shooting? It almost felt like a dance, like you guys had choreographed it.
We started working on that really early. I mean, we started on that when God, this was even before we went out and started scouting, as I recall. We started to once we had the space available to us. Once production design had created the space, we got in there and started to to kind of work with that. Ryan had really wanted it to be graphic.
Yeah.
He wanted it to open graphically because he wanted to make sure that while we took the liberty of going inside of the psyches of the boys, that we never lost sight of the fact of the heinous crime that had been committed, and that's of course the danger of humanizing, and of course these guys are human, and so
Right.
you had to do that. You had to honor that, but at the same time we had to honor the gravity of the crimes they committed. And so, yes, we started working with that really early, and it was really very carefully choreographed. I think it might have been a little more brutal. I don't remember, in terms of the face of the father. I thought, we might have. I don't know. I seems to recall that his face was a little more not as blown apart.
Okay.
Uh, but yeah,
Yeah.
but it was yeah.
Yeah. It was very intense to cut that footage. Um, but also just I think it was important to remind the viewer like you're you're going to fall in love with these boys by the end of it. They have some really amazing traits and really, great character traits, but they also did this horrible thing. So it was, I do think it was important to show how brutal the killing actually was.
And because the family, the mother and father, the way they come off in their relationship with the boys is not particularly positive.
Right.
So,
Hmm.
that was important for us to, again, so that it wasn't just the balance of the dynamics didn't get, too weighted in one direction.
I think something interesting about that scene is that there was no blood on set. It was all visual effects later.
Mm.
Um, and I think that's why we were studying the crime scene photos so intently, because we were trying to make sure that bullet wounds and, blood, the amount of blood was accurate. Um,
Hmm.
and I think I had a lot of people asking me if we'd over exaggerated it. And I was like, I've seen the crime photos. Like, I can tell you that it was awful. So,
Yeah, two shotguns. I mean, damn,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
going to be, yeah, up close like that. Oh my God,
We should
yeah.
go back to talking about Milli Vanilli. Way more fun.
Yeah, yeah, and they, and Milli Vanilli was somehow so emblematic of the era and of the situation too. I mean, it just was they and how they were caught, etc. All of that seems like it's appropriate here
Yeah,
somehow.
yeah.
Yeah,
I think it was a known favorite of Lyle Menendez, which is why I think it plays so heavily throughout the season. I mean, we go back to Milli Vanilli a few times after that.
yeah.
Yeah.
You've been with Peggy Tachdjian and Carl Franklin for the Monsters, Eric and Lyle Menendez story. Thank you for joining us, and it has been a pleasure.
So fun to talk to you, Carl.
Pleasure. Good to see you again,
You too.
Peggy.